Who's missing?
Nobody.
No one's back there? Erica
White.
White. Smell you later, losers. Okay. Check. All right, y'all.
Are we doing notice today?
We are doing this today. That's exciting.
You take her.
You are going to have a map and a BBC article this week. So, and by this week, I mean next Monday. So, and by the map, I mean next Tuesday, because I forgot to turn around. This is the easiest map we do all year. That's true. The BBC news is due Friday. The map will be due next Tuesday. Okay. He says that a lot. I think that every time a freaking map comes out of a backpack, it's like, really?
I love how the map is like there, but he's still standing in the corner of the screen dancing like out there.
Yeah, I know. I was just with my
That thing keeps dying. It's not even the map. What is he talking?
It's a true story.
I'm not sure what I'm saying.
Go on the Explorer, Get with it. Anyways, where do we leave off?
Mineral.
Alright, so we're here. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But yeah, the plan is to have a quiz this Friday and kind of get back in the swing of things. You know, hopefully we're not supposed to have any more snow this week. Allegedly. All right.
We saw a guy. We were coming along
That's all.
and there was a guy up on a snow mound and his truck was still running. He was just sitting there. So you're gonna look out the window.
It's gonna succeed because these days are starting to go longer, and now when we go back to school, it's gonna be
Like all day.
hours.
They need to go back. Oh, yeah.
Like all day.
This means you get out when it's sunny and nice as opposed to like being there when it's dark. And He's okay.
I don't think it's sunny outside when I wake up, so I can't sleep in the car. I feel that.
First world problem.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's funny, we actually are going to be talking a little bit about weather today, which I know is your favorite subject in geography. Look out. Weather. Yeah. Get with it. But one thing I will say is that, at least in terms of location, you can kind of break Europe up on the cardinal directions. What's Europe like weather-wise in your imagination, world of your imagination?
Cold and rainy. Kind of cool.
I mean, because that's all right. I mean, whatever you say is going to be kind of correct depending on where you are. You know, Mediterranean is basically like the tropics. You go farther north, you're in like, you know, the Nordic countries. It's, you know, ice and snow. It just sort of depends on where you are. I mean, Western Europe alone has Mediterranean in the south and tundra in the north. So I mean, pretty much everything, you know. The thing that's weird about Europe, though, is it is warmer on average than it should be. You see, there's four main causes of that. The first and most obvious is distance from the equator. Okay? And the farther away from the equator you get, the colder it gets. What's the second one, do you think? Distance from the equator. What else? Why weather would be different? What causes weather? That doesn't cause food.
Like where they are.
It doesn't cause weather.
Like where they are, where the sun is.
Well, that's the equator. The equator is the most direct area of sunlight in terms of our planet. So yes, you're right. But again, that kind of same thing. South America, this is particularly true.
Elevation.
There you go. There's elephants. Elevation, right? If you're higher up in elevation, it gets colder, lower, warmer. I get you.
You don't need it. She goes, elephants.
So the third one we haven't dealt with too much yet, is wind. Look at what's outside.
That's why they have a lot of windows.
It's not that it's windier in Europe per se, although certainly you're right in terms this was providing your first power sources. But rather, winds bring whatever weather with them. Think of it that way. So if you have winds coming from a more northern latitude blowing south, you can bring those cold winds and cold temperatures farther south. Look outside. You know what I'm saying? This is what we're dealing with right now. The same thing is also true if we have something wind blowing from the equator up into a more northerly climate. It can make it warmer. In the case of Europe, you have these two wind patterns coming from the Atlantic Ocean, from Africa, and from the Nordic area in this kind of Arctic circle, and it all comes in the center of Europe and gets disseminated due to the effects the Alps had in changing the wind patterns. So this sort of changes the weather, so to speak. For instance, look at England, all right? Or the United Kingdom specifically. I don't think I have anything else to do on this map. All right, now head west. Canada. The weather is pretty much the same, right? Not exactly. England's a lot warmer than Canada. I mean, if you go farther south, Canada, you got to think about this. Canada's farther north than all of our northern states. I mean, we're talking parts of it are like up here in the Arctic Circle. Granted, not much is going on up here. You know, people tend to live near the border, as we said, but it's still pretty cold here. You know, it's not like that in England. We don't see England with 15 feet of snow. It's not uncommon to have that in Canada. So why? It's because of the winds. It changes the climate to what it should or should not be. Years ago, during the Middle Ages, there was actually a reversal of the winds. We think. We don't really know what caused this, but it made England's climate become much warmer, like to the tune of a Mediterranean climate. One of the things that they started doing to take advantage of this new climate was to grow grapes, which were made into wine. You can't grow these in England for the most part because it's too cold. But because of this shift, this climate shift, you could. But after 10 years or so, the shift went the other way, and so it got colder again. And this basically killed off all the vineyards, and there's still remnants of it. Hey, we know this happened, and scientists still aren't 100% certain what caused that. Obviously, due to the shift in the wind, which does happen every now and again. And so things are just kind of interesting. This is one of the reasons why weather is so gosh darn hard to predict. But ultimately, again, Europe's got a lot of different climates. Now, generally speaking, just like with everything else, the weather is going to determine how people go about their daily lives. And one of the things you're going to see regarding Europe is the, hang on just one second, make certain everyone's dying. Nope, marshmallows, we're good. Yeah, I always double check, just to make certain. Marshmallows are dead. It's kind of a big line, but some people take the marshmallows seriously. Anyway, moving on. So, the mountains, yes, thanks. Basically, weather influences daily life. And mountains in particular are going to influence Europe quite a bit. One of the things we have to understand is water is incredibly important to human life, not just because we need to drink it. We need it for crops. We need it for all kinds of different things. And fresh water is a very, very scarce resource on this planet. Consider this. What percentage of the earth, roughly, would you say is water?
75%.
Hey, it's 70, but yeah, not too shabby. Not too shabby indeed. And this is roughly, mind you. And how much of that is fresh water?
2%.
Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood. It's less than 5. I can't tell you exactly. And how much of that could you just go grab a glass and drink it?
0%.
You probably wouldn't want it. You could in some circumstances. Some people do. But it's kind of, It's kind of risky, yeah. It depends on where you are, let's put it that way. If you're getting it from glacial runoff in the north of Scandinavia, you'll be fine. There's nothing in that except water. If you try to get it from the Ohio River, you're going to feel really bad about yourself and your choices. So fresh water is incredibly scarce stuff. And the fact is, mountain runoff provides some of the best water that you can find. So this mountain runoff coming from the Balkans and the Alps and the Carpathians, all the mountain ranges in Europe, helped to establish these first civilizations and indeed the farming communities that made Europe possible. Furthermore, the types of crops that are developed in this region are going to give rise to bigger civilizations that are going to be able to conquer the rest of the world for the most part. So it all comes back to geography. Geography really kind of is everything when you get right down to it. I suppose that could be said for a lot of different sciences, but I digress. Now, another thing to understand how mountains affect us is culture. Consider this. How do mountains affect language? It seems kind of like a nonsensical statement, doesn't it? A bit like, how do dogs influence weather patterns? But the fact is, mountain ranges isolate people. Hang on a sec. No? Nothing? I know, right? I still want to get a giant foam shark and put it over there so it looks like the shark's talking to us. I don't know why. Freshman comes and why is there a shark in the wall? It just he talks to us.
Yeah. Keeps company.
He keeps us company, yeah. Shark Week all the time. Who doesn't? Don't answer that. We don't talk about those people.
Yeah.
But anyways, they isolate people. Consider this. Communication is pretty difficult when you get right down to it. For the most part, if we take technology out of the picture, you can talk to someone in front of you. Yes, that's it. People around you, people you know. If we take technology out of the equation, which is most of history, pretty much long-distance communication is an impossibility. The only way to really communicate over long distances is how? Yeah, right? Pigeons. Pigeons have to carry things, so they don't talk. Last I heard. The bird is the word. Anyway, the thing is mass communications is an important part of our daily lives. When you think about it, you guys are more connected than anyone has ever been in the history of the planet. You guys have at your disposal, most of you, a device that allows you to connect to this international technological marvel, the internet. The greatest collection of human information that has ever existed on this planet. And the simple fact is you have access to it always, 24/7. You can use devices to call someone anywhere in the world.
I was just talking to my cousin and I heard this.
What limits you? What limits are placed upon you about talking to anyone in the world? What's the one thing? Maybe. I mean, the thing is, you can surmount these problems. The only thing that really comes to mind to me is language. You can speak English, speaks English. So this begs the question: how do mountains affect language? Because without technology, it isolates people. Now, it's a funny old thing. We as human beings tend to speak like people around us. If you listen to somebody speaking with a different kind of accent, and you like this person, you will start to speak with a clip of their accent. Now, the funny thing is, we learn accents relatively easily. Accents are actually pretty easy to do if you have practice at them. We've all had that thing where I'm going to talk like a British person, and it's really awful and doesn't sound anything like a British person. Exactly. Right. Which, by the way, it's a funny thing. There's actually 16 British accents. Exactly. And if you're from there, you can tell the difference between where someone is
The
from.
Beatles sounded
Kinda
like
like
other
us.
southern accents.
Exactly. Again, because of isolation. Now, here's the funny thing. If I were to take one of you and drop you in any place in this world, I don't care where it is, assuming that you could, get along, you had someone, like, let's say that I'll just drop you randomly. It's like your exchange student, right? You're going to stay there for 16 years. Do this whole thing. Now, I'm not just saying like you're going to be there for like 2 weeks. I'm saying like you're going to live there for a while, right? Not only will you learn whatever language is there, just to pick it up, like even not knowing anything, I could drop you in Istanbul, and you start speaking Turkish because you have no choice. That's the best way of learning a language, and you'll work it out. The second thing is you're going to adopt an accent from wherever you're at. Yes.
If you're like British and you come to America,
Yes.
can you lose your British
Yes.
accent?
Great example of that. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the TV show Doctor Who, the new remake version. There's a character in the first season called Captain Jack Harkness. The actor who plays him, I think it's John Burrowman is his name. He's actually Scottish. His parents immigrated when he was fairly young, and he was bullied pretty heavily in school for having a Scottish accent. Well, he learned to speak with an American accent because of it, because he didn't want to stand out. And he actually took voice acting classes and things like that, and he's an actor. But if he ever goes and visits like family in Scotland, he drops back into a Scottish accent. And he was actually interviewed with his partner, who said it was the weirdest thing the first time he ever heard it, because he had never heard his partner use that accent before. So just kind of like it's like dating someone and knowing them very intimately, and suddenly they speak Chinese. Where did this come from? No, you didn't know I spoke 15 languages? No, I didn't know this. Or something like that. It's just a thing, And the thing is like, you'll see it happen. My wife is originally from the far northern part of Indiana. Basically, her grandparents live in Michigan. So she has, whenever I met her, she had kind of this, nothing of an accent. We'd go visit her grandparents, suddenly she's speaking like someone from like Detroit. What?
I like Wisconsin accents.
Fantastic.
My friend's grandma, she's British and everything, and every year she goes and visits her family
Yes.
in England and stuff. And okay, maybe like her grandma's going crazy because of how old she is, but when she went to go visit in England, obviously like she has a British accent no matter what. But then when she was on the flight back to America, they had like American movie playing, and she turns to the person next to her and says, "What language are they speaking in this movie?" And the guy's like, "English." And she was in England for so long that she honestly couldn't even recognize the language of people speaking with an American accent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
Yes.
That's kind of sad. And she's born here. She was born here in America, but her parents are from Brazil. So twice a year they go to Brazil, and her mom, she has an accent still, but you can understand her really well.
Yeah.
But when she comes back, you can barely understand
Yeah,
her.
because of the accent, sure. And it's one of those things that it's more than accent, language. There's a lot of plays on words and things like that that don't necessarily translate in proper English. There's also dialects within English. And we can go on and on and on about this sort of thing, but ultimately physical land masses is what caused that separation as people develop these independent languages. And if you look at areas where there's more mountainous area like in the east, you have even more diversity in those different cultures. And so much so that this can cause violence to break out. If you look at like some of the most horrible abuses of human rights in Europe, probably think Holocaust, that certainly was, but there are even more in the eastern part of Europe, farther east along the Balkans. So, it's something that's very much a part of culture caused, once again, by physical geography. So we're talking winds and weather patterns here, but it's also language and culture. This shows the Atlantic Gulf Stream, or the jet stream, as it's coming over, and again, bringing these different wind patterns into Europe, and again, changing the weather, which is kind of interesting from the standpoint of someone who's looking at all these different changes. You will need to know this word, timberline. I'll talk about it a few times. I've actually already talked about it a few different times in South America. But just to show you what it is, so everyone knows, it's basically it's the point on a mountain where trees no longer grow or can't grow. This shows, or basically it's a mountain's bald spot, is the way of thinking about it. And one of the things we talked about was unseasonal winds called foehns, F-O-E-H-N-S's. This is what happens whenever the winds shift, and this can cause these to happen, which are pretty problematic, as you can imagine. Avalanches are incredibly devastating. Snow is really heavy. I don't know if folks are quite aware of that. Can we talk about the heaviness of snow?
Like the roof?
Yeah.
Oh.
So easy peasy. Now look at southern Europe. It's Mediterranean. I mean, makes sense. Mediterranean seas there. So we call it Mediterranean. It's the Mediterranean climate. What's funny is the Mediterranean climate is sort of like tropical and it's dry and wet. For the most part, however, you do have certain seasonal variations. The main factor of weather in this region is, of course, the Alps, in particular redistributing these winds. The other thing is culturally, the Mediterranean region has a lot of similarities, even with cultural differences. For instance, let's pick 3 countries that are in the Mediterranean climate: Spain, Libya, and Turkey. What similarities do they have? Do they speak the same language? It's okay. Spain speaks Spanish. Libya would be Arabic. Turkey would be Turkish. Okay, so no, all different languages. That is an Altaic language. That is that is a Aramaic language and a Romance language. So now the same language families. Culturally, are they the same? No, not really. There's pretty distinct differences. For instance, again, main languages, or rather main religions practiced in these places. Spain would be Christianity, sure. Catholicism specifically, yes. Libya would be Islam. Mm-hmm. Turkey, also Islam, but different kind of Islam. So similar, but also different. So what is similar then? Well, a big thing of it is food, to be perfectly honest. The types of crops that grow there are pretty much the same. And the fact of the matter is that when you look at cuisines, they're pretty similar. You know, a lot of seafood, that sort of thing, with local variation in terms of other types of things. There's actually dishes that stretch the entire Mediterranean that are cooked everywhere. Now you have regional specialities. For instance, you know, you might look at I forget the name of the rice dish in Spain that's famous for, I don't remember. Anyways, versus difference from Libya or Turkish. But one thing they also have in common is certain types of crops that grow there. One thing that's pretty common throughout the Mediterranean as far as a dessert is baklava, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, baklava is a dessert that was almost universally reserved for weddings. So if you think about weddings, they're special occasions, obviously, and they tend to have foods that take the longest to prepare. I mean, think of a giant wedding cake. Yeah, it takes a long time. Baklava was a dessert that was generally reserved for special occasions in the Mediterranean. Basically, it's a pastry that's cooked with a very, very fine dough. It's called filo. It's so thin, if it's not damp when you use it, it can't be too damp, otherwise it'll stick, but if it's not too dry, it'll actually tear. It's like you can see through it almost. And basically the way you prepare the dish is this. You start with a pan and you butter it, and then you put a layer of this dough down, and you butter it back, and you put more dough on top of that, and more butter, and more dough, and more butter, and you do that for 13 layers. Then you make a filling that is made up of crushed nuts, cinnamon, and it's flavored with rose water, which is a derivative of making rose oil. And basically, roses, the best way I can describe it, what it tastes like, if you've never had rose, is it tastes like roses smell. If you've had it, you probably know what I'm talking about. If that doesn't help, the best way to describe it, maybe you guys can agree or disagree, is it's almost like a citrus, but it's not like orange or lemon, it's distinctly different.
So if you're like allergic to roses, are you allergic to rose oil?
I would assume so, yes. I wouldn't try it. Okay. But anyway, it's like it doesn't hint, it's like a customer. But anyway, so you put a layer of the filling. Then you put 7 more layers of alternating butter and dough. Then you put more filling, more dough and butter, more filling, it's usually done with the filling layers, and then 10 more layers of dough on top of that. And it sounds like it'd be like this high, it's not. It's actually only about that thick when you're done with it. Then you bake it twice. The first bake is to set it, the second bake is to finish it. And then you make a sauce that's made of honey, usually it's flavored with another citrus, that you pour over, and it's a lot of sauce, a lot of this syrup. And so much so, like, that's much is your dough, the syrup's like that high over the top of it, right? Then you let it sit for a while. When you come back about 15 minutes later, all that moisture is gone. It's been sucked up by the pastry. And so it's an incredibly sticky, very sweet, decadent dessert. It's fantastic.
Do you buy this somewhere? I really want to get it.
Myers. Yeah, it's kind of meh, but it is baklava, yeah. It's not that, as crazy as that sounds, it's not that hard to make. It is labor intensive. It takes me about 2 hours. Now, I cheat. I use frozen baklava. I use frozen phyllo dough, excuse me. But the thing is, it takes a long time to make. It's the same thing in the Mediterranean. Who invented it? We have no idea. The Turks say they invented it. The Greeks say they invented it. The Spanish say they invented it. It's everywhere. Yeah, right. The other thing is pita. Pita bread. It's considered pita malak. Yeah, right. The funny thing is you guys know gyro sandwiches?
No.
Gyro, G-Y-R-O? Gyro.
Gyro?
I think they're gyro. It's that word is Greek. Gyros are not Greek.
What?
It's Turkish.
Oh, so interesting.
The Turks actually have a type of meal called doner kebab, which basically is sort of like meatloaf. It's a bunch of it's like a meatball. It's like a giant tube-shaped meatball. And what they do is they toast it over fire, and they cut off the toasted bits and put it on a sandwich. They didn't season with all this different stuff. It's actually fantastic.
You should make some baklava and bring it in.
Can't do it. One, they frown on you kind of making big things like that. The other thing is I don't have time for that. Normally what I do, actually, to be perfectly honest, I've had a friend who is Lebanese just frown at me and say it's not baklava. I make mine with Rice Krispies instead of nuts, because nut allergies, But I don't have time to make baklava. I haven't had time for that for a long time. Besides, my daughter just went off with a napkin. But it's good stuff, What? Another famous dish that the Turks have